As I'm drawing my figure, I don't worry that it looks too perfect. I just worry about conveying the message of movement and walking. I know I'm going to go beyond this drawing with other materials, so I don't worry about everything looking exactly how I imagined it in my mind. I just worry about creating something that I can recognize myself. Sometimes it can be really hard to draw what we picture in our head. We can get really hung up on it looking perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes it's a lot more fun to just enjoy moving the pencil and not worry too much about what it looks like. Good. Do you see me? Next, I'm going to get my security envelopes. It took me a couple of days to collect this many, but that's okay because then I know that if they got wet in the mail or they touched other things, they can sit and be dry and ready to go. I'm going to take my security envelope and gently open it. I don't really need this part, but I think that pattern is kind of interesting, so maybe I'll save it for some other artwork down the road. So now that I have some of my windows separated, I'm going to look and see maybe where I can find an interesting part of my artwork. Now these are much smaller than the image I drew, but that's okay because we're going to do a lot of little drawings on top of it. So using my security envelope, I'm going to grab a permanent marker. I like to use permanent marker because I feel like they don't smear as much as some other markers do on this drawing surface. Now I'm just going to trace one little section of my drawing. And again, I don't worry too much about it being perfect. In fact, I might even change it as I go. I might want to add some patterns into it. Right now, I'm using just one color on this piece. And I have a little bit of a drawing there. So if you look closely, you can see this one's rather light. So next, I'm going to pick a much darker color. Oops. I don't need my yarn yet. All right, this time I'm going to grab a different section and I'm going to trace again. And I'm not going to worry about whether the two sections line up. I'm just thinking about getting some of what I drew onto this little window. It doesn't even have to be the whole thing. And as I'm going, I might make additional parts of the drawing to make the space feel interesting. Or I might leave it very basic. This time I used, again, one single color. And I'm going to keep going until I have at least 3, but hopefully more, individual security windows. Sometimes I might add something more into my drawing, like I'm thinking it might be nice to see some nature, some trees, or some grasses. And I'm not worried about whether the colors actually match right now. I'm just doing one color for each tracing I do. Now that I have several little windows with different drawings, I'm going to lay them out, and a couple of them had 2 windows. I'm just going to very carefully cut them so they're separated. And I might take off a little bit of the extra paper, but I don't want to cut all the way to the edge of the window. As I'm looking at these, I don't even really recognize my original drawing, but you know what? That's okay. I think it's really interesting to make artwork that starts in one place and takes a journey and then goes somewhere else, maybe somewhere we didn't expect. If you're doing this project at home with a friend or a family member, this would be a fun point to look at everybody's windows and see how they did, what they did. You might even want to trade one of your windows for someone else's and make your artwork together using a mixture of the windows you made and the windows they made. Or you might just want to use your own. Now that my windows are done, I'm gonna put a piece of blank paper here, just so we can kind of see the marker. And I'm gonna start experimenting with layering them. Now you might be really tempted to try to put your image back together like a puzzle. Try not to. Think of it instead as an experiment, and you're just exploring the different ways that you can layer different colors together. Try lots of different configurations. Maybe you want to put in some diagonals. Maybe you want to try layering them all one right on top of another into one very thick rectangle. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. We're going to play and have fun and not worry too much about what it's going to look like when we're all done. Once you decide on a design for all of your windows, you're going to grab some clear tape. If you don't have tape, you could use glue. I'm just going to take my tape and gently find all the spaces that are overlapping and touching and make sure they're taped together. With the clear tape, you don't have to worry too much about where you put it, but if you're using staples or you don't have glue that dries clear, you might want to just add it to the spots where the paper touches and not where the window touches. I'm just having fun. I'm not worried too much that it looks perfect or that other people who are looking at it can see and think exactly what I was seeing and thinking when I made it. Now I have this really interesting composition of different lines and patterns and colors all overlapping together. And I think it's looking pretty cool. So now we're gonna mount it or put it onto a sturdy surface so even though it's very thin and flexible, it holds up. I'm going to grab a piece of black construction paper. But if you don't have construction paper, you could use something else thick like a piece of cardboard, or if you have an old folder you might be throwing away. It doesn't even have to be a beautiful piece of cardboard. I have this old shoebox, and I've made mine a little big for the shoebox, but I could use a piece of cardboard and just use the blank side. Once I have my window lined up, I'm gonna trace it. And I'm gonna think about this as the frame for my window. I might even move it a little bit so that the frame is just a tiny bit smaller than the actual outside of my windows. So that when I cut it out, the hole leaves a little bit of room to tape the paper or cardboard or whatever you have onto the security window. Just gently fold in half and make one little cut to get started. As I'm cutting out my paper, I'm being really careful to follow my lines, and I'm just gonna set the scraps to the side because who knows, maybe I'll have a use for them for something else another time. I find when I'm cutting out paper and I'm trying to be really accurate, sometimes it makes sense to turn my paper as I'm cutting. Wow, this made for a really interesting shape. I'm gonna save this for another day. All right, now that I have it all the way cut out, I'm gonna put my window in and line it up. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just kind of placing it where it fits. And if you're lining yours up and you need to cut a little extra, you can do that now. And if a little bit of it is showing that you didn't mean to, that's okay too, because we're just having fun with our art. Now, I have this really interesting stained glass window that I've made. And it doesn't look like my original drawing. It looks totally different. After you've taped it in a couple spots, you can add a piece of yarn to hang it with tape or glue or whatever you have handy. think I'm gonna tape it in a few more spots so it's just a little bit sturdier. Now I'm gonna pick, what do I think looks like the top? I'm not sure. I could try it a couple different ways, but for now, I'm gonna tape my string on. I'm gonna think about where I could put this in my house, that it might catch the light. Thank you so much for making art with me today, friends. I had so much fun. I hope you did too. And I hope you'll try this project more than once. Think about different materials that you might have around your house for art making. It can get you thinking really creatively and trying lots of things without spending money on art supplies or going out and buying stuff. These little pieces of window would probably have gone into the trash, or the paper with them would have gone into recycling. But now I'm thinking about them in a totally different way.